Hi, this is Phil Kaveny. I'm kind of a work in progress. I think this is a 50-second video, and we started a couple years ago. And part of what I was talking about then was to achieve some weight loss. And I'm sort of closer to my goal than I was, but I do have a way to go. And the next video that you see come out, I think you'll notice some differences because I got a team working on a makeover and they're making some suggestions for me which I'm going to put into effect. But what I thought about talking about today is books that I have read, how I choose to read a book, what the role of my friends' recommendations is, and I also want to tell you, for those of you publishers who want to send me review books, I've been reviewing books now for the last 43 years. Some of them have been academic. I'm an academic critic. I'm an editor of a best-selling Tolkien essay on Tolkien, Lord of the Rings anthology. So I've had a lot of experience. But what gets me into something new? And it goes like this. I have a friend who has an unusual belief, and they surprise me, then I will say, well, what is it that makes them seem so unusual? And I guess one example I was thinking about, there's an author that I don't like too much. He's a British historian. His name is Nigel Ferguson. He's a pretty big deal, but he's politically conservative in his own way. At the same time, my friend of a lifetime, Dave Yolton, has read him, is interested in him, and Yolton is more of an action kind of a person. But I think, well, what is there that make people interested in this? And in a particular writer. And in other words, I get to a certain point, and then I'm at a tipping point, and I'm going to become interested in what has affected them. That gets me to the first person I want to talk about. And I'd love to meet any of these people, and maybe I'll try to link up with their videos because they're doing podcasts and YouTube and such. But the first one is Malcolm Gladwell. He's a Canadian. He's associated with the New Yorker magazine. His mother, I believe, was native Jamaican, and his father was Jewish. And he talks about his first big book was Tipping Point. And that describes the process by which decisions might be made in a very quick manner, where you might say, well, this person made this observation. How did we go from something being hidden nobody was using, like I have an Android phone now. I don't even know all of the capabilities, but I'm learning them, and I'm becoming a much more effective communicator. And yet, 9 days ago, I didn't have an Android phone, and I was the only person left probably using a flip phone in Eau Claire. Now I have this thing with immense capabilities. I had a couple of my young friends come in and tutor me. I still have much more to learn, but I can carry in one hand what it used to probably take a station wagon or something to carry around then. So there's always something that puts you to a different kind of a phase change, I guess I would say. So what Gladwell is really talking about is maybe the last straw on the back of the camel, or the last grain of sand, or something like that. And as he talks about tipping point, then I get to another book which investigates that a little bit farther. There's he won the Nobel Prize in economics for a work he had done about how economists, all of us, do not reflect the rationality of economic man. As I said, Malcolm Gladwell talks about the epidemiological aspect of change, where people sort of, in a blink of an eye, make a decision and aren't even thinking about it. And he goes so far as to suggest in blink that these decisions are qualitatively as good as well thought out decisions. I'm sort of summarizing it. And I'm melding a little bit between blink and tipping point, separate books, separate ideas, but in a way dealing with the same thing about how change spreads and the decision-making progress. Now, on the other side of this, Danny Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in economics for some stuff he did on behavioral economics, where he talked about something that's called fast thinking and slow thinking. And the idea is that that when you think fast, you're doing something almost intuitive, instinctive, you're losing not much cognitive processing, and it's almost instinctual. But slow thinking involves a lot of decision, a lot of reflection, inputs that you have to make, and it takes what they call cognitive processing. This was the most interesting thing to me, because he was saying that to think and to make good decisions, you have to be aware of things that you do yourself. For example, if I'm researching a particular topic, I go into it with a cognitive bias. Like if I'm going to write about Trump, as much as I would try to be even-handed, open-minded and such, I tend to look for stuff that supports my pre-existing conclusion. And what that means is it's something that you always have to be aware of. Because if somebody has confirmational bias, then you better get other input, because you're only going to see what you want to see. In other words, it's like the song The Boxer with Simon and Garfunkel, where you hear and see only what you want to hear and see. And if you realize that you're doing it yourself, maybe you can do something about it and make better decisions by having people that don't think like you, so that you're not all making your decisions as part of a cognitive echo chamber. Or you can realize when you're talking with certain people that no matter what happens, you're not going to convince them logically, because their belief system comes from another place, and you just end up banging your head up against the wall. It's like when I say there are some ideas about the wall which actually aren't so bad. And all of a sudden people say, what is he saying? And I'm saying, well, it's a big boondoggle public works project, which in fact probably won't do any good as far as any of its policy objectives. But try to say that to a Trump supporter, and they'll be enraged, because you're kind of ridiculing them too at the same time. And what I was saying was, well, okay, so Trump took billions out of the defense budget, so maybe one less aircraft carrier isn't such a bad idea. Well, Trump said we wouldn't go to war over whether Estonia was part of Russia or an independent country. Not such a bad idea either. The rest of the ideas are crap, but you have to sort of be able to see around and not always be constantly on the right side, because you don't know. I mean, and a couple other paths that I want to go down with this. Michael Lewis wrote a book called Moneyball. It was made into a movie starring Brad Pitt. And when Michael Lewis was talking to Malcolm Gladwell, who I talked about previously on a YouTube discussion, I think maybe even a podcast or something like that, something I want to do, Gladwell pointed out that what Lewis was really talking about in the case of the Oakland A's in the book Moneyball was someone spotting what they call an undercapitalized asset. That's somebody who has an ability, but because of some extraneous factor which existed in the people's minds that were selecting people to fill positions, they didn't think that the person could play because they didn't look like what they expected. Where in fact, if you actually ran the analytics on the person, sometimes the best person who filled a position on a team didn't look like who you'd expect would fill that position in the team. Going back about 60 years, there was a coach named Vince Lombardi who took what appeared to be a ragtag bunch of losers and turned them into a world championship football team. And he did so by seeing in each one of these players something that somebody else didn't see. And he was able to say that the sum of a bunch of individuals with different talents was greater than their individual contributions. So you might have, for example, maybe you had a $4 million quarterback, but if you didn't pay your lineman enough to block for him, then he would spend most of the game eating the turf. And so it's a way of thinking about what you have if you're in a position where you're putting a group together that can work together in such a way that you can capitalize on their assets. I came upon this woman named Annie Duke. And Annie Duke was a world champion poker player for, I think, before she retired, with a strong background in cognitive science. Now, one of the things that she told us in her presentations and in her books is that when you're looking at decisions, you have to separate the outcome from the decision. Because it sounds very unusual, but you may have a really good plan. You may have executed it wonderfully, but sometimes you just have bad luck. And it wasn't you, it wasn't the plan. You did everything, but somebody's got to lose. Somebody's going to fumble. Something's going to happen. And if you don't factor in that into what you're doing, you can make some really horrible decisions. So I'm continually trying to operationalize what I read. I try to talk to new people, different from myself, that don't agree with me. I thought of something that I had read and studied when I was a graduate student at UW, talked about education and experience. You learn by doing and making mistakes. And then each time you take one of that mistakes and you turn it into a learning experience. Watch what the next video looks like. I can't wait.